Retro.
Are you an aspiring Jedi, or do you dabble with the dark side of the Force?
Regardless of whether you fancy yourself a defender of the light or an aspiring Sith Lord, you're going to need a lightsaber.
Podcast Stardust is pleased to partner with Saber Masters, the creators of high-quality, durable, and affordable lightsabers.
Saber Masters is preparing to launch the Ultimate Lightsaber 2.0, and right now you can get 2 for the price of 1.
So, check out the link in our show notes and go get your ultimate lightsabers from Saber Masters.
And don't forget to use our referral code Stardust to save $10 at checkout.
And each purchase using our referral code helps support Podcast Stardust.
Hello there. This is James Arnold Taylor, the voice of Obi-Wan Kenobi, and you're listening to Dennis and Jay on Podcast Stardust. Their behavior is continuously unexpected. So uncivilized.
Hello, and welcome to Podcast Stardust. This is the fully armed and operational podcast dedicated to Star Wars news, reviews, and discussion. I'm Dennis Keithley.
And I'm Jay Krebs.
And it's time to talk about episode 5 of The Acolyte. And we'll get to that in just a second. But before we do, Jay, remind everybody where we can be found around the internet.
Of course, we can be easily found on Facebook, Instagram, and X at Podcast Stardust.
All right, the dish is aligned. The signal's boosted maximum output. The shield's down. We are now broadcasting to the galaxy. This will be our full spoiler discussion of episode 5 of The Acolyte. Before we get into spoilers, though, Jay, why don't we just do a couple minutes non-spoiler wise? And what was your overall reaction to this one?
Well, out of the 5 episodes, I would have to say this is probably my favorite one for several reasons. It also made me very angry in a few ways that we will talk about. A little unsettled in a lot of ways as well. I'm still trying to make my peace with this series, and so it's just I'm going to be honest. It is probably my least favorite of anything that we've gotten so far, especially of the live action stuff. But as far as that goes, of course, I'm a completist, number one, and I'll gobble up anything Star Wars. And 2, for our podcast, we have to continue on. I have found some bright spots in the series for sure, but I'm still trying to find more. But again, overall, definitely my favorite of the season thus far. So how about you? How do you feel?
So, yeah, I wouldn't call this my favorite Star Wars series, not by a long shot. Is it my least favorite? I don't know. It's too soon to tell. This episode is one of my favorite episodes of live action Star Wars on Disney Plus when it comes down to it. There's no, not going to venture to say this is a spoiler. There's a lot of lightsaber fights in this one,
Right.
and they're extremely well done. And but then we get some reveals. We'll get some other things going on. I like this episode quite a bit. It was my favorite episode of the series so far. This series is not without its flaws, that's for certain. I don't dislike it, but like I said, I can't tell you really where it ranks. I'd have to sit down and really think about all the series, line them up and stuff like that. When it comes down to it, I applaud this show for trying to give us this dark side mystery here. I just don't know that they've necessarily laid out all of the segments of the mystery in the best order in order to achieve that. But maybe we'll touch on that as we go through it. But anyways, I like the show. This is my favorite episode of the show. One of my favorite episodes of live action Star Wars on Disney Plus, not counting the movies, just because of some phenomenal action in this one. And okay, well, there we go. That's a very brief non-spoiler section of the show, and let's just dive into the rest of it. This is, for the most part, from beginning almost to the very end, a lot of fight sequences. When it
Yes.
comes down to it. And quite frankly, I think some of the best, if not the best, lightsaber sequences we've seen on Disney Plus so far. The next best, I think, might be what happened to Ahsoka. I'm not sure. Not like there's been an abundance of them on Disney Plus, but what do you think about that?
No, I completely agree. And I do appreciate and value that for sure. And I do
Hmm.
think that it was well done, especially the choreography and the way that the different sequences were set up. Again, there were some things that really angered me about some of those sequences as well.
Hmm.
But I do feel overall that they did do a very captivating job of, definitely keeping my attention, number one, and making it believable for Star Wars in terms of the styles that we've seen thus far, and, just appreciating that as someone, both of us, obviously,
Hmm.
that are very familiar with all of these kinds of things. So I think from that aspect, the Star Wars fan that has been with Star Wars for a long time, I would think would be pretty happy overall, and I was as well.
Yeah, I remember there was an interview, probably on StarWars.com is where I read it, where Daphne Keene was being um, interviewed, and she was talking about the fight choreography for this and how their benchmark was the fight between Darth Maul, Qui-Gon, and Obi-Wan from the Phantom Menace, and they were trying to top that. And
Ah,
through 4 episodes, I was like, where is this fight you're talking about? It's
mhm.
not that the action scenes that we had seen previously hadn't been impressive. They were good. They were nothing, though, spectacular that necessarily put them in that category above the Phantom Menace. This ranks right up there, though. This was incredibly intense
Yes.
and really inventive on that. At one point, I think it's Yord who says that, our dark side character, which they're now calling the Stranger on StarWars.com, is doing things that are unanticipated and things that they've never seen before, and they can't keep up with it. And yeah, there was a lot of stuff we hadn't seen before in this fight. And so I did appreciate that. Let's go ahead and tackle the 800-pound gorilla in the room real quick. So we get the reveal of our dark side character. It's Kamir. And I
You
know
were right.
last week said I was going to be kind of disappointed if that happened. And I'll say when that helmet fell off and we got the reveal that was Kamir, my initial reaction was disappointment until he started talking about things and how he doesn't make the rules, the Jedi make the rules. And when he's asked what he is, he doesn't actually necessarily call himself a Sith. He says, I don't have a name, but I'm what you Jedi might call a Sith. And from there he says, you guys don't let me be, you won't let me use my power or wield my power the way I see fit, and therefore you've seen who I am and you all have to die because you don't allow me to exist. What did you think about the reveal of this character being Kamir?
Well, like at first I was like, "Ah, really?" They really went there, but part of me thinks that was super clever because it was definitely something that even though we kind of expected it, we didn't
Hmm.
expect it, and he really was believable as this sort of psychotic character.
Hmm.
He was very much, you could just tell, unhinged in so many different ways. But there's just so many things about his origin and what his purpose is that maybe we're going to get those answers in the series, and I certainly hope so, but it just doesn't really jive with what we already know. And I think that's one of the things that just doesn't like sit well with me.
Okay, so I'm going to need to clarify. What do you mean by doesn't jive with what you already know?
Well, we were led to believe that it was believed that the Sith had been extinct for 1,000 years before the Phantom Menace, and that, there was no uprising whatsoever, unless, of course, Kamir, with a stranger, whatever you want to call him. Some people are calling him Darth Smiley.
Ah,
Um,
yeah.
Smilo Ren, I've seen that one too, Darth Teeth. But at any rate, unless he literally gets rid of everyone who's ever seen him, then that doesn't jive.
Don't you think that's actually what's going to happen? I think that's what I'm
Well,
thinking is going
the
to
way
happen here.
things are going with the death count, I wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah, I mean, Soul's the only living Jedi. that
Right.
went on that mission right now, and now he's got Mae trailing him onto the ship. So how much longer is he for this galaxy? Okay,
Mhm.
so a couple things on that. One, it was believed the Sith were extinct. Not necessarily that it was not definitive that they were in that case. That was Yoda, that was Mace Windu talking in The Phantom Menace about, the Sith had been extinct for a millennia. Now, the way they got around that, of course, in Legends was that Bane engineered all of that. And then he went into hiding and he established the rule of two so that they could remain in hiding and
Right.
gather their power to the point until they got to the point where someday they could challenge the Jedi and defeat them, destroy them, which is what happens in Return of the Jedi. Now, we're not exactly following that time period, but I've always kind of believed that the Sith were out there in hiding doing this same thing, even if it wasn't the same origin story that we got from Darth Bane's novels out there. And yeah, when he revealed himself, again, one, we're taking it for granted that he is in fact a Sith. Because there's a bit of ambiguity built into the way he revealed himself. It's like, I don't have a name, but I'm what you Jedi might call a Sith, right? So is he or is he not? They kind of,
Mhm.
I wish that line had been a little bit clearer. And
Yeah.
then we've got 3 episodes left in this. And so, who's to say that there isn't going to be some other twist on top of all this?
Mhm.
So I think I'm fine with Kamir if he's a Sith or if he's not, he's some other dark sider. I'm willing to give this series the last 3 episodes to settle what all that is. And it may be that he and Mae wander off. It may that be Kamir is defeated in all of this, but then we still have to deal with the whole they've been extended for 1,000 years, and I don't believe they could have returned without us knowing line from the Phantom Menace. So if he's defeated by Jedi, then they'd have some record of that from just 100 years ago.
Mhm.
So I
Mhm.
don't. To me, it seems like if everything's going to line up with canon, we can't expect any of the Jedi or any of the heroes that have seen Chimera to survive this if they don't or either if they don't survive, then they maybe have to join him.
Right. So,
So
okay,
all
so here's a
possibility.
couple, yeah, no,
Mhm,
everything that you said is awesome, and I
mhm,
I completely understand where you're coming from. My big stumbling block is just the fact that, as you brought up Darth Bane, as we know, there is this rule of 2,
mhm,
one master, one apprentice. So, what I'm trying to justify in my mind is Kamir, does he really have a name, and is he really a Darth under someone else? You know what I
mhm.
mean? An apprentice under someone else. And we just don't know that yet. Or is he just so off his rocker that he believes himself to be a Sith, but he's really not? You know what I mean? Like,
Mhm.
obviously, he's very, very well trained. He is very well armed. He is very cunning, but where does that leave him in the lineage? You know what I mean? Like, it
Yeah.
just doesn't, and that's another thing, like, for me, it's like, okay, rule of 2, what is going on here?
Patience,
Unless
Jay.
I know, and I guess that is probably what is, this whole series is about. We've been told it just because just when
Yeah.
you think you know what's going on, you
Yeah.
don't. So there is always that in the back of my mind.
Mhm.
And so the only other thing that I can think of is that they're gonna justify, they being the Jedi, Yoda, ate all, are gonna justify this by saying, "Well, technically, he wasn't a Sith."
Well, that's if they even know about him at this point,
Mhm,
and they don't. The only people
mhm.
who know about him
Right.
are these Jedi,
But I'm
and
saying if they do, like, it'll
right.
be almost like a "from a certain point of view" kind of thing.
Mhm. Mhm. Well, it also doesn't speak well of the chances of Osha and or May
No.
surviving all of this.
No, it does
So
not.
yeah, we may have a very tragic ending to this story when it's all said and done. And
Mhm.
so okay, let's talk about a few other things because we could spend an entire hour just talking about Kamir
Oh,
and
sure. Yeah.
whether he's a Sith or not. And I did want to talk about a few other things. I'm still gonna talk about Kamir. Let's talk about his fighting style. Okay, his cortosis helmet and gauntlet that he had, he was using to extinguish the Jedi lightsabers. I was blown away by that. That was a
Now
fantastic addition to the show.
now that is a fact, that was cortosis, because I was thinking maybe Beskar too.
Well, Westgar doesn't extinguish the weapons, and they did
True.
mention on
Okay.
StarWars.com that it was cortosis.
Okay, okay.
Yeah.
See, I didn't dive into the trivia part of it. So, wow, that is reaching back. Talk about Darth Bane days. That's what he mined.
Yeah. Now,
Yeah.
apparently, cortosis came up in one of the Thrawn canon novels, but I certainly don't remember it there.
Mm.
But I saw that conversation online. But I loved the way it was used. He was headbutting lightsabers
Oh, yeah.
to put them
That was
down,
really cool.
and and then the Jedi were stunned by that. So were they not aware of cortosis, or what was the deal there?
Yeah, they were very stunned, and they were basically just dumbfounded looking at their lightsabers, and all I could think was, "Don't look at your lightsabers, like, use the Force, do something, Force push him, something."
Mm-hmm. Kind of shows you that these Jedi are from, well, several of them. They had lightsabers. They train with the lightsabers, but there just aren't, up until now, there just aren't adversaries that they ever have to that they've encountered that they ever have to deal with like this.
Mhm.
Because this fight threw them for a complete loop. I mean, the episode starts with a dead Jedi near Osha, and then she hears the fighting going on elsewhere, and right off the bat, Kamir skewers one Jedi and then does a force pull to skewer a second Jedi on that same
Yeah.
lightsaber, one that's still going through the first one. And then it apparently beheads them, but that's like from behind a tree at that point. So we don't really get to see it. And, so, okay, Nameless Jedi, hate to see them die, but still not our main characters here. But over the course of this episode, both Yord and Jecki are defeated by this guy.
Mhm.
What did which one of those hit you harder?
Oh, Jackie, for sure.
Mhm.
She's always been my favorite ever since we started talking about The Acolyte, and I don't know
Mm.
what it was for me that I was totally attracted to her character about, but she did hold her own for quite a while.
Mhm.
And I literally yelled an explicative when he brought her down finally, because
Mhm.
I honestly thought that she was gonna get out of that. I really did.
Oh, did you?
And yeah, I really did. I mean, part of me was like, okay, yeah, no one's safe. That was always in the back of my mind. But then I'm thinking, okay, but that's what we're supposed to think. So maybe she will make it out of this. But the breaking of the neck, that was brutal. I mean, every one of these deaths were brutal, more so than I had anticipated them being. And you talked about those two Jedi being basically skewered together. It was like
Mhm.
Jedi shish kebab essentially. But the way Jackie died with the 3, it was almost like you've seen that with shooting. Was that called like en masse or something like that, where there's 3 shots
Oh,
in
yeah.
like a triangular sort of
Y
a
grouping, a
array?
tight grouping there, right, but
Yeah.
yeah. Well, and then, Kamir, the stranger, but I'm not even sure if Kamir's is really his name, or if that's an alias when it comes down to
Mhm.
it.
Sure.
He's fighting Jecki. She has the 2 lightsabers, so she has hers and Kelnaka's up until, the stranger slices, I think it was Kelnaka's,
Mhm.
knocks the top of it, and then she's still taking it to him, knocks off his helmet. And then he pulls the fast one by separating his lightsaber into 2 separate lightsabers. And this is not the Asajj Ventress, like where 2 blades are screwed by the pommel to
Mhm.
make them unite into like a double blade lightsaber. No, like one was built into the hilt of the other one. So I never
Yeah,
seen
that's unique.
lightsabers like that. So I thought that was a pretty cool development for dark side lightsabers.
Yeah, definitely. Because at first I thought maybe it was sort of a Cal Kestis
Hmm.
arrangement, but then obviously it wasn't. But did you think for a minute, I did actually for a hot second, that maybe this Sith could have been one of and I can't remember her name, the mothers from the past of Mae and Osha? Did you ever think that? Because there was at one point where she said, "My mother could do that, get into people's heads, like Jedi's
Hmm.
heads."
Yeah.
So
And okay, so the long answer to your question is yes. At one point, I did think that that was a possibility. It was amongst the pool of suspects. If you remember last week when we were talking about the first 4 episodes of the Acolyte, and then we were talking about how this has been presented as a mystery, and
mhm,
that when you have a mystery, especially for like if you're going by the golden era rules, you typically have to do certain things, and one of which is your killer has to be somebody that you've met early on. It can't be like you just meet this character late
Hmm.
and have it qualify as like this mystery. And so, we got it as Kamir, which was someone that we got to know within the first couple episodes. And the Nights, I almost call Night Sisters, but they're not. They've been influenced by the Night Sisters. But the mothers, that coven of witches, were also a possibility. And I was thinking Mother Anastasia specifically, but then we got a shot of the stranger's arm, and it was pale flesh, so that quickly ruled that one out for me. But then Mother Coral, I also thought
Hmm.
was a possibility there, although
That's
I'm
who I
not
thought it
sure
was.
that helmet was going to fit on her head.
Good
Um,
point.
but hey, stranger things have happened. So I hadn't like definitively scratched anyone off my list until we got that reveal. But yeah, I mean, they gave us a pool of suspects. And then the other possibility was one of the Jedi that we'd already met. Speaking of which, okay, so at one point, the stranger says to Soul, do you not recognize me, Master Soul? And Soul's response is that, "Yeah, I sense something familiar." Are we running that off to their confrontation on, and I can't remember the name of the world, where Master Torben was killed by Mae? Or do these two have a history that goes back farther than that hasn't been revealed yet? What do you think?
Yes. Because I think it could be either, honestly,
Mm-hmm.
because at first I thought, "Oh, it's gotta be from that world where they encountered each other, that's where the familiarity comes in." But then there's some things that are said that make me think otherwise,
Mm-hmm.
such as when Soul says to him, "Show your face, like, why are you wearing the helmet? Are you afraid to show your face? Da, da, da." And then Kamir, the stranger, says, "And let you read my thoughts." And then Soul says, "What master hides his face from his pupil?" And then Kamir says, "You tell me." So there's sort of this familiarity there that goes way beyond just a surface familiarity. So I think there's something a little more deep in that. What do you think?
Yeah, no, I feel like there is, because the stranger seems to know an awful lot about what Soul and Dara, Torben, and Kanaka did back on that planet with the Coven of Witches. I really should have written down the name of all these planets, but I didn't. So,
It's all
hey,
good.
there we are. And that seems what he's referring to, that, you're not who you say you are. And so therefore you're hiding your identity to your Padawan. And I think he's specifically thinking of Osha at that moment,
Mhm.
not Jackie. And so at the very least, he's got some knowledge of Soul's past. And I think it goes back beyond whatever May would have told him on that, because it seems a bit, just by the way he's talking. I can't point to anything definitive, but it does seem like it's a little bit more firsthand, if you know what I mean.
No, I totally agree. And that's where, again, there's something about him that seems to know Soul a little bit more than just surface stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
Yeah. Now, the other person that has some recognition with Kamir was Yord on this. And, he jumps into the fight and he looks the stranger in the face. And he's like, "You." And at first, I was like, "Oh, wait a minute. Maybe this is a former Jedi that Yord knew as a Padawan." But then I was thinking, in Yord's case, it definitely was from having encountered him on that planet where Master Torben got killed. Because why would he have why would he have that reaction now and then not back then, if you know what I
Mhm.
mean? So, I
Mhm.
mean, I don't think that there's any past between those two. But do you think differently?
No, I think you're right. And that kind of makes me also rethink, what we were just saying about Soul as well, because he saw Kamir at the shop too.
Hmm.
So, okay. I have to think that one over a little more.
Yeah, I think the difference is that I don't think Soul was attempting to uh, discern any type of other identity from Kamir
Mhm.
at the time of the shop. And at this point, the stranger is uh, taunting him like, "Don't I seem familiar? And don't you recognize me? And why is it that you hide yourself to the pupil?" So there seems to be a little bit more going on there. And he's now wearing the helmet, which apparently can block a Jedi's ability to the. I didn't realize this was really a thing, to read thoughts. Whereas
Yeah.
in the past, it was always that, the Jedi and the Sith could kind of read each other's emotions and stuff like that, but it just didn't seem to be like a broad-based ability just to be able to read anybody's thoughts on that. We saw Kylo Ren pull thoughts out of Rey's head, but that was a very intense, invasive, you know, hand on her head, type, almost hand on her head type of a thing. It was torture for Kylo to do those type of things to Rey and to Poe in The
Hmm.
Force Awakens. And I really can't think of anything other than like that. When the Jedi have interrogated people in the past and used like the Force to compel them, it's not like they pulled the thoughts out of their heads. They interrogated them and through compulsion made them talk.
Right, right. And maybe that's what he meant.
Mm-hmm.
But then again, we've seen that all Jedi do have, well, not all Jedi, but there are a lot of Jedi that have very specific force powers.
Mm-hmm.
And so maybe Souls goes well beyond the power of persuasion type thing. And that could be another clue to the depth of familiarity between the two of them.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm with you. Yeah, the whole helmet thing, being able to block that, again, is that something that obviously cortosis has the ability to be able to do, which is very interesting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so there's that. Okay, we should probably talk about Mae and Osha a bit on this. The early on, in the past episode, rather, Mae had basically told Kamir that Osha's alive. I don't need to do this anymore. I'm going to turn myself into Kalnaka. Yeah, since Osha's alive, that's the only thing that matters. And so Kamir, the stranger, whichever you want to call him, the Sith, I've got him listed like all three ways in our notes that we're reading from here, is not happy with Mae in this episode. At one point, when it's Mae, Jecki, and the stranger in one spot, the stranger points out that you can learn something from Jecki. She's a loyal pupil, and because Mae is going back on their deal, where
Hmm.
was not going to go kill Kalnaka. And so, okay, this brings up some other things. Why is Kamir taking it personally that Mae is not killing these four Jedi, or seems to be coming up short? Other than he wants a pupil, and he's trying to lead Mae through this path under the dark side to become a Sith or whatever he is, but he got ahead of Mae and killed Kelnaka himself. And is it because he didn't want Mae getting to Kelnaka and having another Jedi Master there that could maybe stand up to him, or is it personal for the stranger? I don't think we can know the answer to that question just yet. But what are your
Hmm.
thoughts?
Well, I think again, he is pretty unhinged. I mean, he seems to be wonky bonkers. And as we've seen too, sometimes people like that are extremely intelligent.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that for him, I'm almost wondering if he wanted to pin that on her, on Mae, to make it look like she was even more in depth of her crimes, which is
Mm-hmm.
what the Jedi did believe. And so then she would have no choice but then to join him once again because she had, no other way to go. And that kind of put the nail in the coffin, so to speak, for Osha to believe that she would be evil.
Mm-hmm.
So, but yeah, and as far as May goes too, her little wishy-washiness is something that she's a little unhinged. I mean, and we've seen that since she was a child.
Mm-hmm.
And Osha even calls her out on that. And everything that she's done because she's so violent and she's so this and she's so that. And it's almost like in some ways May is believing that she did these things for the good, and, we'll get into that a little bit more here, but there's some echoes of Anakin in there, obviously. But that's the way I feel about that whole setup, is that it's just trapping May to have basically no other choice. But what did you think?
Well, so there's a lot going on with Mae, and a lot of it goes from the things we didn't see. When it was in episode 3 that dealt with what happened 16 years ago with that Coven of
Mhm.
Witchens, and Mae firmly believes that she was in the right, that the Jedi were invading, and she was doing what was in their best interest to defeat the Jedi.
Hmm.
The point of view that we got of that episode was Osha's and
Right.
not Mae's. And from Osha's point of view, Mae was pretty unhinged. You nailed it when you said that. When Osha wasn't going to go along with the rite of ascension and was reluctant of that, Mae was very upset about that and was already smacking her then. Then afterwards, when Osha wanted to leave with the Jedi, she got locked in a room. Mae started a fire, and we're led to believe that that nearly killed Osha, and it definitely killed everybody else that was
Hmm.
there. Meanwhile, it certainly doesn't look like a whole bunch of people got burned to death. When all
Right.
that's being said, and Mae firmly believes that Osha's been brainwashed by the Jedi, but that she can help her. And Osha's response is, no, you're responsible for all this, and she's not going to let her blame it on anybody else. And that's when Mae does that force push that knocks her out, and she takes, she cuts her hair with a lightsaber. That was a pretty cool move, by
Hmm.
the way.
No, I
Uh,
agree.
I will never have hair long enough to do anything like that, nor a working lightsaber, but still pretty cool. And then she follows Soul back to the ship. Okay, so I've kind of gotten derailed from what you were asking, but going through all this, there's a lot that we don't know yet that I don't think we can adequately judge on these characters for, because there's Soul's promising Osha that he'll tell her everything when they get back to the ship about what happened. Is it Brindok? Was the name of that planet? I think it was.
Oh, I think you're right. Yep.
Yeah, finally came to me.
Good
What
job.
happened on Brindok, and it's not going to be good. And Kamir was alluding to that. That this is clearly the thing that's being hidden this entire time. And so Mae follows Soul back to the ship. Okay, a couple questions for you. I know we're just kind of throwing questions back and forth without ever really coming to resolutions. But one, why do you think Mae just followed Saul back to the ship? Is it because that's the best place she can try to kill him, or she's trying to find out more information? And two, do you think Soul realizes that that's not Osha, that that's Mae? Because when Mae shows up there, and Soul recovers, his question to her is, "Where's your sister?" Not "Where's Mae?" It's "Where's your sister?"
Mm, good point. Good call. I don't know if he knew that that was a switcho changeo or not, quite honestly. But when you say it that way, I wonder if maybe he did have a little bit of an inkling. But then if he did, why would he turn his back to her? And
Mhm,
so the only thing that I can think of is it's kind of one of those the enemy of my enemy is my friend sort of thing for May,
mhm,
is that this is going to place her in the best point for doing whatever it is that she ends up wanting to do, whether that is getting herself right with the Force and joining Osha and the rest of the Jedi again. But again, it reminded me so much of Anakin on Mustafar, when Anakin's yelling, "You've turned her against me," when in my point of view, the Jedi are evil. So that's where May is coming from right now. She thinks Osha's been brainwashed. She thinks that she's in the right. Um, so her whole MO is a little bit unclear at this point, but that's the best that I can come up with at this point. But what are you thinking?
Yeah, I don't think May at this point has got any delusions that she can surrender herself to the Jedi at this point. She followed Soul, and I mean, she just could have told him who she was at that point if she but she's deliberately taken up a disguise. I think I think one of the possibilities is that she's trying to kill Soul to get back in Kamir's good graces. Whether she's gonna she's gonna go along, because that's the other thing that happens is the strangers talk about how he wants a pupil. He wants a pupil, and he's hoping to get a pupil out of this. And then he refers to May as a pupil that's been disobedient, that's betrayed him. So I don't think May's got any good intentions there. Maybe she wants to find out some more information before she does Soul in, but we'll see on that one. Two, there's been a lot of discussion, or enough discussion anyway, about that Kamir was concerned with Soul's ability to read minds. So I gotta think that he senses something is off, or he
Mhm.
would be able to sense something is off in this case. And then that gets us to the final scene of this. Stranger shows up, picks up his helmet, takes the part of the cloak that he'd already dropped, and he finds Osha lying on the ground, kind of flips her over. I'm pretty clear he knew that that was not Mae, if no other reason for because of the tattoo on her arm, and
Mhm.
he was already able to see past the attempt at deception again back on that planet where he was playing apothecary when Torben died.
Right. No, I agree with you. There was no doubt in his mind that that was Osha. And so that's just gonna be sort of a pawn for him, you know what I
Hmm.
mean? That he's gonna be able to use her as more of a playing piece than anything else. And that leads me to point out as well that May has that swirl on her forehead
Hmm.
from officially joining the coven in the ascension ceremony. So at
Right.
some point, that's probably going to be her undoing, that they're going to be able to see that, or Soul is going to be able to see that. And to your point about Soul being able to sense that maybe there was something off if he was able to read minds, I do agree with you, but it also might be something that he has to consciously sort of focus in order
Yeah.
to be able to use it. So it may not be something that he just has going on all the time. It's sort of something that he has to flip a switch and say, okay, I'm going to do this as a force, almost like using the force in any other way, whether
Hmm.
it's to grab a lightsaber or, whatever the case may be.
Yeah. Well, I'll be curious to see that part. Okay. Last thing I want to talk about before we wrap this up is just what do you think about the stranger's statements about the Jedi in the first place? He's basically playing them or painting them as being, yeah, I don't know, despots when it comes to the Force. That he wants to be able to practice the Force the way he sees fit, wield his power the way he wants to. But the Jedi forbid that. They forbid people like him, and they
Mhm.
don't allow him to exist. So therefore, everything that's happening is their fault. Later when Jackie's dead, Soul says she was a child, and Kamira's response is, "Well, you brought her here."
Yeah, that was a dig. Wow.
Right. And then, he'll say things like, rules, rules. You guys keep coming up with these rules. You can't break them if you don't follow them.
Hmm.
And so I know we've kind of painted him as unhinged over the course of this conversation, but I don't know that I agree with it, but there is some logic to what he's saying. Do you buy into this that, he's painting the Jedi, and the Coven of Witches did the same thing as kind of oppressors when it
Hmm.
comes to this. They have their own way of practicing the Force. They feel like they should be allowed to pursue it, but the Jedi forbid it.
Yeah.
What do you think about that?
Yeah, well, as I said, he is unhinged, but he's also extremely intelligent.
Hmm.
So, and I still stand by that, there were some really great one-liners in here, and you pointed out a bunch of those. And I mean, he's not wrong. I mean, if we look back at even, going all the way forward to Luke, one of the things that he pointed out was the hubris of the Jedi. And so I think that Kamir, the stranger, whatever, is looking at that and saying, you people are hypocrites in your own right. And everything that you think you do correctly. But I'm going to tell you that that's not the only way to be. And so he's kind of the extremist on the other side to prove them wrong.
Hmm.
So there's that part of it as well. I will say one thing real quick while I'm thinking about it. The one line that made me angry, and I was like, "You're not allowed to say that about him," was when Soul says he is no Jedi, and I was like, "No, the only person allowed to say that is Ahsoka."
Well, and she's one said about herself.
I
Uh,
know, but
yeah.
it's a different context, and I know it's supposed to be, Star Wars rhymes, yada yada yada, but I was like, "No, that's Ahsoka's line." So that was just me being very protective.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. Well, okay. So here's the other thing. It's like we've seen in the High Republic, especially Phase 2, all these other sects of Force users. I
Oh yeah.
can't name them all, but I remember the Sorcerers Attuned. And then we had the Brotherhood of the Ninth Door, which we've come to find out are pretty much dark side users. And I think they get abolished at some point or will get abolished at some point on there. And so the Jedi have definitely coexisted with other Force users at times. So has something happened in the last 100 years that's no longer the case? And I guess my other pushback on Kamir is, in this notion that he's trying to make that the Jedi are Force oppressors, when like this is like, I don't know that they are naturally going to oppress anyone that is trying to use the Force, but it's the people who are following the dark side,
Mhm.
because that ever ends well. I mean, you
Mhm.
know, and so I don't. I don't know that that's entirely fair. If your whole MO is that, and it seems like he's almost talking himself into this, which is that I want to use my powers the way I see fit. Well, that is an awfully big window to look through, and that's a big door to walk through when it comes to this. How do you, to what? Oppress others? To conquer, to murder, to make people bend to your will? That's that. No, of course they're not going to let you do that. No one should let you do that.
Hmm.
That's terrible.
Right, right.
And so, um, you know, well, I don't want to necessarily paint him as completely unhinged. I do think he's a little unhinged. I think he has his logic, but there's a major flaw in that. It's Palpatine, uses the dark side to conquer the galaxy, and there's no ifs, ands, or buts about that. And he goes so far as to start making dark side clones so that he can live forever and rule the galaxy forever. So, this is the problem with all that. So anyway, that's where I come down.
Yeah, and I think what it does come down to is that we need to find out who he really is for sure.
Mhm.
Come here. Where does he fit in this whole puzzle? Because as you said, his MO, what is he doing with this power? What is his goal? Is his goal for dominance? Is his goal to extinguish the Jedi? Is his goal to try to overthrow and rule? We don't know that at this time. So I don't know that we can really lay any kind of claim to where his intentions fully are.
Mhm. Yeah, and I'm not sure what all this says about him being a Sith when it comes down to it, because he did not unambiguously claim the title of Sith. He says, "I don't have a name, but Jedi might call me a Sith."
Mhm.
And if he truly is a Sith, then he has to know about a rule too, and so this notion about, and so I don't know. It both supports and detracts that you Jedi have these rules, and because you've seen me, you now, yeah, I'll have to die because otherwise
Mhm.
I can't exist. Although it was kind of funny when, I don't know, it's funny, but it got a wry chuckle out of me anyway when uh, Soul says to him, like, why would you risk revealing yourself? He's like, well, I did wear a mask. So
He did. There was that little bit of humor in there. You're right.
yeah.
Yeah, I chuckled a little bit too. I did wear a mask, so you
Uh-huh.
ruined that whole thing. And as we're talking too, it makes me think to myself that Asajj introduced herself, I am Sith. And
Mhm.
she was not part of
Well, is that
the Master
Cindy
Apprentice.
Tartakovsky's Clone Wars, or did she do that in Dave Filoni's Clone Wars too?
Well, I believe that she associated herself as a Sith in canon as well, because
Yeah,
she
see,
was
that's the
led
other
to
comparison to
believe
make, is that she was much more of an, because we have a master and apprentice, and then,
she was a
Sidious,
disciple.
yeah, and Sidious told Tyrannus, your assassin, student, whatever, is getting too powerful. You got to get rid of her because there's only
Mhm,
two of us. And so whether she thought she was a Sith or not, it was immaterial. There's only two of them. She kind of falls into this idea of what is an acolyte,
mhm,
because again, master apprentice, and why are we talking about an acolyte in this show as opposed to an apprentice? It's just because
mhm.
the Apprentice was a show on NBC, and and there's whatever. The acolyte just sounds cooler, but yeah, it'll be interesting to see if where this all ends. If this really is a Sith master, if this is a Sith apprentice, if he's a Sith at all, if he's just some sort of dark side user that wants an acolyte who's modeling himself on the Sith. There's a lot of possibilities, and I feel like we have a lot to learn over these last 3 episodes. This episode in particular reminds me of The Usual Suspects. Who is Kaiser Soze? When it comes down, it's not a perfect one-to-one comparison, but anyway.
Mhm. Yeah, there's a lot of question marks right now for sure.
Mhm.
And I mean, really the definition of an acolyte is simply a follower, someone that, you know, kind of worships another for their abilities and wants to learn from them. So,
Mhm.
loosely, but yeah, and I guess, again, acolyte, apprentice, both of those things could be used as synonyms, but
Right, and the stranger's using acolyte and pupil interchangeably.
mhm,
He's treating them as synonyms, so he's looking for a student when it comes
right,
down to it. So, all
right.
right. Well, you got any other final thoughts before we wrap this up?
I did think it was cool how those creatures that were attracted to the light,
The Umbra
picked him up
moths.
and just kind of is umber moths, is that what they're called?
Umbra moths, yeah.
Ooh, fun.
Mhm.
Took him away, and then, of course, I didn't believe that he was going to
Oh,
die
no.
because of that, but that was a cool little way to get rid of him with the whole, attracted to the light thing. And that was one thing that bothered me about Yord when she's like, "Turn off your lightsaber. Do it. They're attracted to the light." And he's like, "Huh?" And he's just standing there. It's like, dude, just, if that were Anakin drop, boom, he's down, and he's just like, "What?"
Sure. Yeah, I think the difference is that he's in this position where he's got to get the citizen back to the
The
ship.
citizen. Yeah.
And he's trying to protect her, and he is not convinced of her intentions when it comes down to it. So I can understand his reluctance, but yeah, guys, come on. You got
Right.
these giant moths, Mothra's coming after you. Let's do
Right.
something about it. So
And did you think that that reference to the citizen was, right from kind of a Clone Wars homage sort of thing?
I was trying. It was clumsy. It was
It
very
was very
clumsy.
clumsy. I was
Yeah.
wondering if they were trying to do that and it just didn't land.
Well, and the difference is that when Mace would call Ahsoka that, it's because Mace was really annoyed with
Mhm.
her. It's like, "Okay, this is Jedi business, citizen," or whatever it was he said. He put particular emphasis on that word. Where in this case, it was, May is not currently a Jedi. She had training as a Jedi, and they had some responsibility. I mean, bystander. I mean, it was essentially that's what they were meaning by citizen was bystander, and like
Mhm.
this is, we got to protect the innocent bystander type of thing like that. And so I don't know. I thought that was just kind of clunky on all of that. I don't know if it was supposed to be an homage to what happened in Clone Wars or not, but it certainly wasn't used the same way. And I just was assumed that they just said, Osha, come on, you got to get Osha to the ship. She has a name. You all know
Mhm.
what it is. She's right
Mhm.
there. It's
Right.
so
That's why I was like, I'm not quite sure if they were doing that on purpose because it just didn't quite land.
yeah.
But of course, Basil, I think, is the only one that truly 100% knows that May is not Osha because he's sniffing around
Hmm.
and he's sniffing the little part of Pip. And then, so I think he knows right away that that's not going to be who that's supposed to be, number
Yeah.
one.
I
But,
generally don't like to guess several episodes into the future,
mhm.
but I would not be terribly surprised. Yeah, because he keeps running away. He leads them to places, and then they can't
Yeah.
find him anymore. And then he sniffs things, and he clearly makes revelations. We have no idea what he's saying. Yord was the only one who did, and now he's dead. But could you just not see a scene at the end of this show where all the Jedi are done, and but Basil's kind of witnessed everything, but he keeps hiding and running off, and then suddenly he thinks he's in the clear, and he turns around, and there's a stranger to take him out. That seems like a classic Star Wars dark side ending, whether it's Sith Shadowhunter or whatever the books that we've read. I could just see something like that coming for him.
Yeah, either that or maybe Basil's actually working for Camille. Dun,
Well,
dun,
there's a thought too.
dun.
Yeah. All right.
That's why he keeps disappearing.
Annoying little character. I know he's popular with a lot of people. I just find him a little annoying. So anyway. Okay. Well, then I think we'll go ahead and wrap it up there. Thank you all for joining us for this episode of Podcast Stardust and our discussion of episode 5 of The Acolyte. We'll be back over the next few weeks covering the 6th, 7th, and 8th episode as we head full steam ahead towards the finale. And if you've enjoyed our discussion and you want to make sure you catch our discussions of upcoming episodes, then make sure you hit subscribe to Podcast Stardust on your podcatcher of choice. And you'll get all those episodes as they come out. I'd also like to remind you that you can find our entire catalog of shows over on retrozap.com, which is home to several other great podcasts covering all kinds of geek topics from superheroes to video games and a whole lot more. It's a great place to go and check things out. And we always appreciate your 5-star ratings reviews on whatever podcatcher that you use to catch your podcast, especially if that's Apple Podcasts. And we also appreciate it when you share the show with your friends on social media. So with that in mind, Jay, I want to remind everybody what our social media contacts are and where else we can be found around the internet one more time.
You got it, Dennis. We are most easily found on Instagram and Facebook, as well as X, at Podcast Stardust. And you can check out the plethora of other places that we are found, such as Pinterest for a whole bunch of fun ideas and boards. And we do have 2 YouTube outlets where you can find us, both the traditional YouTube channel as well as YouTube Music. So head over to both, like, subscribe, and share those out with your friends. And then we also have a Discord room on the RetroZap Discord server, and you can check out the link in our show notes to get in touch with us that way. And then if you'd like to support the show, we sure would appreciate it. And you can head over to a couple of different places, one of which is TeePublic. And we are tpublic.com/user/podcast stardust. That link will also be in our show notes. And you can pick up one of 7 different show logo designs available on all kinds of things, from apparel to home goods, coffee mugs, tote bags for the beach, you name it. And it's probably over there. And another way that you can support us and support your own lightsaber habit, especially after watching this particular episode of The Acolyte, is to head over to Saber Masters. And if you do happen to peruse their many different types of amazing battle ready lightsabers and decide to get something, make sure that you put in the code Stardust at checkout, and you will earn an extra $10 off of your purchase, and we will receive something in return. So once again, the link to that will be in our show notes. So with that, Dennis, I know you've had a lot of stuff going on with travel and whatnot, but why don't you let everybody know what you got going on with Warp Trails or any other types of podcast appearances you've got coming up?
Sure. So Warp Trails is the Star Trek podcast hosted by myself and my wife, Beth, is exclusively on the RetroZap podcast feed, or you just go to retrozap.com and find it. We are behind. We're trying to find time to do a wrap-up episode for the last couple episodes of season 5 of Discovery, which is also the final season, before we get to the 5th and final season of Lower Decks coming up later this year. So if you're into Star Trek, we'd love it if you check it out. Jay, why don't you go ahead and tell everyone what the latest in cosplay is?
All right. Well, you can always find me on my Instagram, which is at j.snipscosplay. And you can catch me as Ahsoka, Hera from both Rebels and the Ahsoka series, the Fourth Sister Inquisitor from the Kenobi series, and now Tales of the Empire, as well as my High Fae Queen that I'm having a lot of fun with, my original concept Mandalorian, which is also a lot of fun. And you never know what else you're going to find. So once again, that is at j.snipscosplay.
All right. Upcoming on the show on Monday, we are getting back to Star Wars news for the first time in over a month. And so join us for that. And then on Wednesday, we'll be having a discussion of John Jackson Miller's The Living Force. So if you've had an opportunity to read that book, make sure you check out that episode and what we have to say about it. So thanks for listening to episode 748 of Podcast Stardust, everyone. Have a great weekend. And until next time, may the Force be with you.